It is the final word story time. 207. Adam Collins back with you on story time for the first time in a little while. And, well, not that long, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, but it's been taken care of when I was back in Australia last week by the man who's down the line from me right now, Daniel Norcross, who had Andy Zoltzman with him for a stunning twist on story time. I love the way you two did it together. And I think the week before that, it might have been you and Brett. So 3 weeks in a row for Norcross. How are you feeling, mate?
Well, I'm kind of getting used to the fact that I'm back, and there are leaves everywhere, and more importantly, there are people making that horrible noise with the leaf remover, which I don't like leaf removers, and I'm also sort of gazing into the blank chasm of winter, because once October is over, and as you may know from my theory, my Second World War theory. October is the phony war. That's when we send kids off to Shropshire to lark about and, just avoid what bombs weren't yet falling. But once you hit the 1st of November, which, just for those at home, we are recording this just before the 1st of November. It's very proximal. Then the shoulder goes to the wheel. The clocks have come back. The darkness has encroached. The Blitz is around the corner, or Diwali, as I like to call it, followed by fireworks night, which is so fucking apt. It's unreal. But, I've got some cricket to keep me going. I thoroughly enjoyed watching the New Zealand-India one-day international series. Those poor women were basically sent from glee and joy and much imbibement on winning the World Cup in very surprising fashion to head straight over to India and play 50-over cricket in series.
Yes.
A couple of those games in the Narendra Modi Stadium in front of almost no one, and it's like 40 degrees. We know what that's like. So, I've been enjoying watching a bit of that, and the arrival of Georgia Plimmer. It turns out she's not a fraud; she's for real. She'll be around for a while, the cheeky chipmunk. So looking forward to that.
It felt to me, and I said this on the weekly show, that it was going to be, that classic kind of coronation, right? To win the World Cup and go back to Narendra Modi Stadium and so on. But because India didn't make the second round, it sort of fell flat a little bit on that front. But they did win that series 2-1. I should have said off the top, by the way, story time 207. There's a few interesting 207s that float around. Mike Gatting, friend of the show, made 207 at Chennai. That's right, in 1985. Ricky Ponting got a 207 against Pakistan at Sydney in 2005, which I was there for. That was Shane Watson's Test debut. There's an Everton Weeks. There's a Keith Stackpole. That was his highest score in Test cricket against against England in Brisbane in 1970. That's the one where he was run out by a metre and a photographer caught the image, the still, it was on the back of the paper. But I think it was Colligo, wasn't it? Didn't give him run out. That was the umpire who gave no leg befores for the whole 71 series for England. And Nasser Hussain, perhaps the most memorable 207 because it contained it was the most number of fours, wasn't it? 38 fours. No one scored more fours than that in a test knock out of 200 or lower, or some version of that. So an innings we've talked about on story time before, which is when England went 1-up in the Ashes in 1997. So a bit to pull through there.
There must have been a lot of dots in that innings as well, wasn't there?
Must have been like one of those, what you and Zoltzman often do is describe your busyness index. This would have been kind of the opposite of that, with Nas finding the rope on quite a lot. You look at it here, balls faced 337, just going to the card at the moment. So
152 of those in boundaries. That's 55 off. How many? Sorry, what did you say?
337. 337 all up.
337. So that's 299 balls for his remaining 55 runs.
I like it. I think we did talk to
That's a bad business index. That is a laziness index.
Daniel, the other thing I wanted to say before we get into things, this being November, we're into a new month, and I am absolutely chuffed to report that this is the month where we renew our vows with Cbus Super, who have been with us. They were I reckon Cbus were our first ever proper fair income commercial partner going back to 2018 or something like that. Certainly 2018 was when we first had a relationship with them. And yes, they'll be with us throughout the course of the Australian summer, the southern summer, which we count as being November through until March for final word purposes. I think that's how we do it, something like that. But yes, the 40th birthday of Cbus is 1984. It was my 40th birthday in 1984. Well, this year, sorry, I turned 40 this year, but was born in 84. And it's the same for Cbus, the same for my wife, Rach, And that was the year when trade union members saw an issue with the way the retirement system worked. They were determined to change it. They bound together. From as they say, little things, big things grow in super, and the building and union superannuation scheme was established to settle that industrial dispute. One thing led to another. I'm being rather reductive there, but one thing did lead to another. And now there's that $3.5 trillion capital pool that invests in Australia in major markets across the globe and provides Australians with greater wealth and choices that they have when they leave the workforce as individuals as well. So super's a great thing. Cbus are pioneers in that pursuit. We're going to tell you so much more about Cbus Super over the course of the next 4 or 5 months. So great to have them back. And they'll, being the first episode that we're recording of the show in November. And yes, Jeff and I have always liked riding the Cbus. If you want to go back to that 2019 Men's World Cup, when there were T-shirts made up of Cbus that reflected that fundamental misunderstanding that it's not CSEA bus, it's CBUS. So there we go on that front. Daniel, one other thing before we get into the main part of the show, our live shows for the summer of 24-25, they are not far away. The first of our live shows is in Perth, on the 21st of November. And then we have one in each of the test playing cities this summer. Melbourne's on the 29th of November. That's our big one. That's the biggest venue we've ever had a crack at. That's going to be one of the 3 Glenn Maxwell shows, Daniel. So we're basically doing, like, as we're recording this, it's the day the book's been released. It's effectively a book tour, Final Word live shows merged together. So he'll be with us in Melbourne, Adelaide, and Sydney. And that will give Final Word listeners the chance to buy our book bundle. So I'll explain it to you. If you understand what I'm about to say, it passes the sniff test, right? So $40 for a ticket to the live show, $35 if you're a patron, right? If you want to get the book bundle, and you want to bear in mind the recommended retail price on the book's like $35 or $36. If you get the book and the ticket together, and if you're in one of the 3 cities that I referred to before, that'll of course include a selfie with Glenn, and he'll sign it personally for you at the desk on the night and that kind of thing. If it's one of the other cities, Perth or Brisbane, you won't quite get that level of treatment, but he will sign it personally. He will write your name in the book. Those things will happen. If you are not a patron and you've just bought the ticket for $40, that will be a bundle at $65. So effectively you get $10 or $11 off the book compared to what you might get if you bought it at a bookshop. And if you are a patron, it's $60 for the 2. So there'll be a discount built into both the ticket and the book for patrons, and for the book if you are a non-patron but coming along, and we love you for that as well. So $60, $65. Does that stand to reason? Is what I'm saying making sense?
It made sense to me, and it sounds like a fantastic deal. And the book is making waves. I mean, let's face it.
Yeah.
This is going to be a book that's going to be talked about a lot throughout this season, because there's going to be a lot talked about Maxi this season,
Yeah.
With his designs on Test cricket. They're there and they're real, and you know all about them. People are going to be talking about them. I've already seen the book trailed in Cricinfo. You told me that Gideon Haigh has been writing about it. So look, this is going to be the book of the Australian summer. I would hazard. I'm not just saying that because you're here.
No. I hope it is. It's got good energy, right? You're right. There were extracts across the papers on last weekend. By the time you're hearing this, lovely review from Gideon. Other people have said nice things about it. The impression is that Glenn's done a good thing here. So I'm sure that'll be reflected in our live shows. He was a terrific guest in Melbourne last year, and I'm sure he'll be again. He won't be the only person with us on stage at Melbourne, by the way. If you went to the show last year and like, hang on, he's just doing the same thing, it'll be different in Melbourne, but he's never done Adelaide or Sydney with us, so he'll be with us in those 2 cities as well. Get the bundle or just get a ticket. The live shows are going to be terrific. We always make them a really big deal. We put a lot of effort into them as well. So bring your mates, bring your teammates, bring your colleagues, Christmas parties, that kind of thing. And if you want to buy a group bundle, if you want to get like a 10 for 1, or not 10 for 1, well, you buy 10 tickets and get a little bit of a discount. We can enable that as well from info@finalwordcricket.com. Be there. Okay. Daniel, time for us to do what we do on Storytime, which is tell the stories of the history of our game through the mechanism or the medium of Nerd Pledge, which I won't yell at. That's more Jeff's thing than mine. Our Storytime History Show 207 is going to be led off appropriately by someone who's been with us since the very start, Dane Hansted. Dane, I reckon, he must have been in the first 20 or 30 people who signed up to Patreon back in early 2019. His latest number is 481, It's in Australian currency, 4.81. Over the years, Daniel, Dane's clues have had a certain theme to them. It's always about Victoria. It's typically about rural Victoria, and it's quite often about Wangaratta. Now, I don't know whether you know an awful lot about Wangaratta, Daniel. I suppose you don't.
Do you know? It's look. There's a few gaps in my knowledge around a lot of things, and I can say with absolute certainty that I do know that I know nothing about Wangaratta.
Well, I'll just say this much: it's about 150 miles north of Melbourne. It's right near the border. So if you're heading towards New South Wales, that might be one of the places that you go through en route. Population of 30,000 at the last census or thereabouts. Its most well-known resident or birth, if you like, it'll be Nick Cave, I'd say. Daniel Andrews, the former Premier of Victoria, who is very well known, of course, as well. But I reckon Nick Cave will be the one who stands out off that list. Lots and lots of footy players. Doesn't look like any Test cricketers. I'm sure Dane will correct me if I'm wrong there, but the chart I looked at was more Aussie rules players and a couple of musicians. So love the fact that we can go back to Wangaratta. We've done that a bit, as I said, on Storytime in the past. We've done the 2 first-class games that were played there, one of which included a century from Graham Vimpani against the touring West Indians in 1996, which I remember very, very well, vividly, from watching it at the time on cable television, and then watching the highlights many times thereafter when C7 used to put on those games on Optus Vision, long time ago now. We've done the List A game that was played there in 2005, which I think from memory was a Victoria-New South Wales 50-over game. We've done the MCC game that was played there in 1958-59. There's one other game that I didn't realise was played at the showgrounds at Wangaratta. That was a Fiji fixture when they toured in 1908. I'd like to do that. So, Dane, I'm queuing this up for your next pledge. Give us the chance to talk about when Fiji played at the Wangaratta showgrounds in 1908. I suspect there's a story or two in that. However, today we're going to go 10 years further forward from the MCC fixture to when the West Indies played at Wangaratta in the summer of 1968-69. Now, from a holistic perspective, that's a test series that Australia won 3-1. It was the summer of Dougie Walters. He made 3 centuries in 3 test matches to finish, including 242 to complete the series at Sydney. And that was all after the Windies went 1-0 up after winning at Brisbane comfortably, where Sobers took a 6-for on the final day to deny Chappell and Laurie and co. It's a decade that people typically don't get too excited about, do they? You talk of the 1960s and Test cricket. There are some noteworthy moments, and I know that you and I have both talked a lot about the 1961 Ashes recently. We both read about it this year and interviewed the authors of that great book, Richie Benno's Blue Suede Shoes. But, you go through it, and a lot of those series are kind of forgettable. It's not an era that people look back with an enormous amount of fondness. But I feel like this series has got a bit of oomph to it, owing to the great names that were playing and the kind of tour that it was as well. Like, how we kind of think about these beautiful English tours that start in April and finish in September, and where they play every county and they play the combined universities and they play every other tour game that's going. And it's a pretty special thing. Well, there was a little bit of that around what happened in 1968-69, where the Windies arrived on the 22nd of October for their first tour game, and they didn't leave for 4 months, and they only played 5 test matches. So, that's a lot of other cricket they've squeezed in there. Then on the back of that, they went over to New Zealand and played another month of cricket, including 3 more test matches. So a proper Southern Hemisphere 5-month tour for the Windies at the time, and a great team they were. Well, they were building into being a great team anyway. Very, very different world. The first game they played was against WA Country. Then they played WA Proper. Then they played the combined WA team. So again, you get a sense of when they went to a city, they kind of squeezed the sponge, played heaps of cricket. And you get a feel for the way these schedules were put together. Teams like Southern Queensland played the West Indies. Northern New South Wales, which don't exactly roll off the tongue, but again, this was the era that we're referring to.
So just out of interest, because we know that tours are basically paid for by the host. This would have been a kind of still an echo, would it, of 60-61? Because as you say, like the 1960s were a morbid and terrible decade. I mean, it's the most draw-laden decade. I think it's the second slowest scoring decade after the 1950s.
Yep.
But the bright lights of it amidst the shocking horror of England travelling to New Zealand and refusing a chase of 245 in the fourth innings in 5 hours, and to draw the series 0-0. I mean, that's a singular lack of ambition. Amidst all of that, Australia playing the West Indies was like the sort of bright spark, wasn't it? Because you went to Pakistan and it was just rolled snot. No one could win a game in Pakistan. No one got too excited about New Zealand. The series in England tended to be draws. I think there wasn't an Ashes series that wasn't a draw, was there? In the 60s, 68 was a draw. 61 was a draw. I think the other one in Australia was a draw. So I think they're all...
Yeah, I think 65, 66 Australia won coming from behind, didn't they? They went down early and they recovered the situation.
Well, that would have been fun. But basically, are the West Indies getting to play everywhere sort of because they're a big draw? That must have been kind of a lot to do with it.
I think that's right. And look, Australia went to the Windies in 64, 65 and lost. That's worth putting into all of this as well, when Lance Gibbs just spun them into a web. And I think they lost 2-1 over there, something like that. But, so when the Windies rock up in 68, 69, like this is, I guess it's tantamount to like a world championship of sorts, acknowledging that England, did drag things back in 68 and famously the final day at the Oval. But the Australian team under Laurie are pretty bloody strong. So you look through it, there's some very and likewise the Windies, and we'll go into a little bit of this about the types of players that
we got to remember that 68, England's tour of South Africa wasn't happening because of the D'Oliveira affair. So in terms of like world cricket, what everybody's got to be excited about, this is like all eyes are on this. And of course nowadays, if all eyes were on it, the last thing they would do is play 5 test matches over 4 months.
No, quite. But I mean, but it does give them time to play these types of games.
Yeah.
And look, we're going to go to the 5th of February now, which is squeezed in between the 4th and 5th test matches. I say squeezed in, they had plenty of time, as we described before. That was their Victoria country fixture being played at Wangaratta at these showgrounds that I referred to before. And it's a single innings game. Now, I draw a distinction there between a single innings game and a one-day game, because it wasn't a limited overs match. It was just like one team batted, then the next team batted, and they played for time. And lucky they did, because Vic Country were bowled out inside 25 overs for 91. So they kept out Wes Hall, but they couldn't keep out Charlie Davis and Lance Gibbs, the aforementioned, and Joel Carew. They got into them and rolled them quickly. Then the Windies kind of did the right thing. They batted all day for 329 for 8 in their 41 overs for the tourist Steve Camacho, who I hadn't heard of before. The name on the page I recognise, but I don't know anything of him. He played 11 test matches and averaged 29 from Guyana, the opener. He made a century. His career ended, I learnt when reading about him, when Andy Roberts hit him with a bouncer in the cheek and broke his cheek. I suppose that was an occupational hazard, being an opener from the Caribbean. In that era that you might cop one from Andy Roberts. Later in life, he became the chief executive of Cricket West Indies. So he led a bit of a life in the game. But the bloke who bowled the most overs on the day was a guy playing for Vic Country called John Romney. Now, this is where our answer goes to. So 481 was our number. John Romney took 4 for 81 from 10 overs. So he bowled the most overs on the day. Yet expensive, but the 4 wickets, and I'll come to those in a moment. Had a look at his profile and what he did in the game. Didn't get a huge amount here. He did play for New South Wales Country against South Africa in 1964. So he moved from New South Wales Country to Victoria Country. And between times played a bunch of games for the ACT. I looked through, and some Sydney club cricket was mixed in as well. But I asked Adam Morehouse, who's the great statistician of ACT cricket, about whether he knew anything of him, historian as well, Adam, not just a statistician, I should say. And he wrote to me and said that he was the Southern District's captain at Cooma, played for Kingston in grade cricket for one season. Now, Kingston was where the game was played a couple of weeks ago. I talked about 40th anniversaries. It was 40 years from when Bob Hawke top-edged a ball into his glasses and nearly lost his eye just before the 1984 election campaign. As Prime Minister, I interviewed Andrew Probyn, who's the Channel 9 chief political correspondent, to reflect upon the game they played to mark that 40th anniversary at that ground just a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, tell me, he wasn't sweeping, was he?
No, he was hooking. He was hooking. Okay. Well, he was actually pulling a ball that I think he thought was going to get higher than it was, and top-edged into his glasses. And so the story goes, he tried to wipe away a piece of glass that was just beneath the eye, and he was caught just in time Had he done so, that almost certainly would have ripped his eyeball open. So,
oh my God.
Yeah, it was intense. Jeff Kitney, who terrific journo from the Fin, who I knew a little bit when I worked in Canberra, was the guy who stopped him from ripping his eyeball open. And Bob Hawke had to campaign with an eye patch on in a double dissolution campaign of 1984, which was traumatic for Hawke.
It's a cool look, isn't it? It's a cool look.
To an extent, it was said at the time it really did affect him, and you expect it would have. There was a lot going on in Hawke's life at the time, became a very public battle with his daughter's heroin addiction, and it was a really rugged time for him personally, and I think that moment typified it. But anyway, that's the ground where our man here, John Romney, played club cricket in Canberra. He played Aussie rules for Monica. So that would have been at that Monica ground, Daniel, that you know there in Canberra that we've both been to in the past. And it was noted in the newspaper at the start of 1966-67 that he was not available as he moved further away from Canberra. That would suggest that's when he moved to Victoria, because we're talking about a game a couple of years on from that. So right-handed batter bowled leg breaks. And those leg breaks on this day were good enough to pick up Seymour Nurse, Charlie Davis, Clive Lloyd, and Garfield Sobers.
Oh, two lefties as well. Two lefties.
Yeah.
Was it with the googly, or was it the sharp turning leggy back in? Oh.
Either way, I love the idea that this, journeyman who was all over the place in terms of where he played his cricket. No further information. He may still be with us. He may not. I'm not sure. It's unclear from the searching that Adam and I have done this evening. But yeah, that afternoon in Wangaratta, in the February of 1969, where John Romney, I would say it must have been the most memorable of his career with the wickets that he picked up. And also a memorable day, I'm sure, for the people of Wangaratta. So, yes, John Romney and Graham Vimpani, the 100 I referred to before. Give them the keys to the city, the keys of Wangaratta, and do so for Dane Hansted, who leads off our show today with 481. Thank you, Dane. Great to have you with us.
That's a beauty. Yeah. Thank you very much, Dane. Now I know what Wangaratta?
Wangaratta.
Wangaratta. Yeah. I know about Wangaratta. Every day's a school day here.
Yeah, that's exactly right, I'm sure. I would love to see. There was a time there when it was vaguely fashionable for Victoria to play some Shield games outside of Melbourne. That's gone away now. The Junction Oval's an unbelievable complex. I was there on Friday. It's so good. Why would you not play there if you can't use the MCG? It makes perfect sense to play 5 kilometres down the road. However, there's a bit of magic, isn't there? A bit of mystique to the idea of an outground, if you like, in county cricket terms. And I wonder whether Wangaratta might host the Victorians again one day. Daniel, you're up next. You've got, with your first clue, first number, Tim Unwin, another long-time friend and pleasure of the show, 359. And I don't believe it came with a clue, or have I got this wrong, Daniel? Am I getting you the wrong number here? I ponder.
No, it's okay. We can do it that way around. I was going to do 682, but
you know what? No. In hindsight, you should do that. Sorry, we're showing our workings. I'm not going to edit this out. I'm going to be authentic to my fuck up. Richard Johnson. 682. We're back with you later, Tim. Don't worry. You've got a big old answer coming later, Tim Unwin, after the break. Richard Johnson, not that one, not the guy that, it might be that one, who knows. 682, it's in Australian currency. And yes, this also was one without clue, which I know you like, Daniel. But you've got you had a bit of a steer as to what it might be. Then my suggestion to you was live a little, ask a few questions, play a few shots. Let's see where we end up.
Well, I'm going to. Because I'm gonna provide you with a fair bit of 682 information. This is 682 time, right?
Love it.
And of course, I could have looked at the 6th of the 8th 02. Sadly, there wasn't really much of interest on the 6th of August 02. I mean, there's stuff, but
What were you doing? What were you doing in the August of 2002?
What was I doing in the August? I was unemployed in the August of 2002, and I was actually putting on a play in Islington. Called The Tapes, which was it gave me an opportunity to. I think I'm the only person ever to have written a Douglas Bader Meinhof gang joke, in which one of my characters mistakes the Bader Meinhof gang member for Douglas Bader, and there couldn't really be two more different people than Andreas Bader and Douglas Bader. Anyway, that's actually what I was doing in August 2002.
So August 2002, who would have been visiting England for Test cricket that year? Right?
Well, that's the thing.
So South Africa in 2003. Oh, it was India when Michael Vaughan bowled Tendulkar. It was the Michael Vaughan big series with bat and ball, wasn't it, before the 02-03 Ashes? There you go.
And I could have gone in that direction, but instead I took the number at face value. So 682. There are no international teams other than England who shower people with international Test caps. So there is only an Englishman who's got Test cap number 682, which I believe is Tom Curran. And I was at his debut at the MCG when, since we mentioned the MCG, and we'll mention it again today, he thought he'd bowled David Warner. Do you remember, for 99?
I do. I was doing the... I remember a bit about that day.
USEN? Were you SEN that day?
No, we weren't quite SENing at that stage. It was before we got the rights, but I was working on it. I was violently hungover after the big Christmas party at my place. Not as in bad a nick as your wife would have been, Catherine, who was very ill. The night before. You had to kind of pile her in, not from alcohol poisoning, but from actual food poisoning.
Oyster poisoning.
Oyster poisoning. But I remember that morning, Rach was coming along to the MCG maybe for the first time. And kind of, pushing her through the gate and saying, have fun, enjoy your day. Me going upstairs to do the Guardian live blog, having written the intro, the preamble on the concourse, 40-degree heat, sat on the concrete feeling like absolute death, and then having to get my act together and then ultimately have to write about what you're about to describe now, I suppose.
Well, yeah, I was. It was the one Test match I wasn't working on that summer. I'd done Australian summer. Yeah. I did the other 4. But in theory, I had that test off, so I was absolutely home free. I could get as absolutely slaughtered as I wanted to, which I did. And then I rocked up to the MCG purely as a punter with a pass, and I wandered into the TMS box just as Tom Curran got Warner out. Now, one does one's absolute best in this job not to be partisan, because one isn't. You just lose the partisanship, but Tom Curran's a Surrey man, and he was making his Test debut, I believe. And David Warner is a pantomime villain, and it's kind of easy to fall into the trope of being happy that he's out for 99. And what I saw was quite an unusual sight, which was a press box that was actually quite, well, a press box, a commentary box that was actually quite happy about someone's misfortune, which doesn't normally happen. So just a little glimpse behind the fourth wall there. And then it was scrubbed out for a no ball, which was absolutely agonizing.
It was what I remember was that it's probably the loudest I've heard England fans at the MCG, only for the roar to be 4 times as loud when they retrospectively called it a no ball. Only for Warner to bring up his 100 from the next ball, and then I think he was dismissed the over after that. I think the sequence went. Or you probably have it written down if you were looking into it, but it was such an eventful half an hour, or not even 5 or 6 minutes of cricket on Boxing Day.
It was absolutely thrilling and kind of silly. But Tom Curran's not really had much in the way of a Test career. He's had an ODI career. That's kind of waning as well now. To me, the most notable thing he's done, because this matters to me, is that he came out of Red Bull retirement to ensure that Surrey completed the three-peat, when there are some players who are on the books there that couldn't be coaxed into playing, I'm sure. More white ball specialists. But Tom, who is a Surrey man through and through, he answered the call and ensured that history was made, that Surrey became the first team since 1968 to win 3 consecutive county championships, and the first team since Yorkshire in 1924 to do it under 3 different prime ministers. So, excuse me. That is a hugely notable achievement from Tom Curran, but I'm not going to dwell on Tom Curran too much because, for reasons. So then I started looking at other 682s. There's runs in a career. Let's have a little run through a couple of those. Joe Root, for example, has got 682 runs at Headingley, his home ground. Now, that sounds like quite a lot, doesn't it, when you think that Headingley doesn't host that many Test matches? But he's ever present, and he's played in all of them.
He is. He does feel present whenever. I mean, what One of my great pet hates in life is elaborate Wi-Fi passwords at press boxes. Like, you don't need to put the brackets and the exclamation mark and it's not necessary, right? But at Headingley, it's Route 1. And by that I mean, I think the password is Route 66 for the, or certainly was at one point the Wi-Fi for the press up there, which made things a wee bit easier. So I do appreciate their love for their native.
They don't faff about in Yorkshire. They call a spade a spade. You know, and also I don't think they particularly mind if someone uses their Wi-Fi. So 682 runs is a lot at Headingley, but nothing like as many as Bradman, who played way fewer Test matches. And he only averages, 42.62 at Headingley, which surprised me. He's got 200s there. One was in his very first innings against New Zealand in 2013. You remember it was actually featured in the sort of, the retrospectives of Joe Root having gone past Alistair Cook's record. There was, that 100 was a really big one because it was at his home ground. And you sort of think, oh, he must have done it lots. Well, he hasn't actually. He got that 100 in 2013 and then another one in 2021 against India, the last season before Basball in the series that was truncated by COVID. And as a result, India didn't win the series because they then came back to finish the series and lost it against an entirely different England team, which I don't suppose they minded too much. But excuse me. But in that 2021 game, he scored 121, which is a kind of fun thing. England won the match by an innings. And Hasib Hamid very nearly helped me with this because he scored 68 and got 12 fours, which is not quite 682, but it's it's a kind of statistical quirk which I was quite enjoying. Hasib Hamid, what a player he might have been and may yet still become. 682 runs against the West Indies. That is the number of runs that Andrew Flintoff scored against the West Indies in his career. He quite enjoyed playing against the West Indies. Many of those in his halcyon period. He had this 2-year block between 2004 and 2006 when he could lay claim to being statistically one of the greatest all-rounders of all time. But it was only for 2 years. Either side of that, not so hot.
I appreciated that analysis from Zoltz on the previous story time. How he went through the I guess the purplest of purple patches, and it can sometimes be said that Flintoff's what would you call it? Not legacy, but the way people interpret Flintoff's career outstrips what it actually was in totality. But if you dig into the numbers, it's more about what he did in that window when he was untouchable that makes him stand out so much. And then there would obviously it took him a long time to get to that point, and he dipped off pretty quickly. But there's a window there, isn't there? When if you're averaging 40 plus with the bat and 25 with the ball for a couple of years, that really does mean something.
And bowling real heat, getting 90 miles an hour regularly. That's when his body was at its most strong, I guess. And then I looked at 682 runs in a Test career. So why limit it to Headingley? Why limit it to the West Indies? Because we might get some dusty old bastards here. And I think we have found one. Frederick Luther Fane, who was born in Curracamp, County Kildare, in 1875. He died at the ripe old age of 85 in 1960. He played for Essex, Oxford University and London County. He was the first Irish-born player to score 100 for England. Do you know who the next one to do it was?
We have talked about Freddie Fane before, and I reckon we've done this too, and I don't think it's Owen Morgan, although it might be. The next Irish-born... It is Owen Morgan, because did Ed Joyce never make 100 for... Did Ed Joyce not get a ton?
Not in a Test match. Not in a Test match.
Oh, sorry, right. The Test is a qualifier, right. So Owen Morgan got a couple, didn't he?
Freddie Fane links us a long, long way into the future.
Yeah.
Because, it's been over 100 years between his 100, I think, and Owen Morgan's. He played 417 first-class matches, didn't bowl, and averaged 27.39 with 18,000 runs. It's lovely to think that there was an era, even when, he was playing at the same time as the likes of Ranji and Fry and to a degree Hayward, Rhodes, Hobbs. He's still getting an 18,548 run, 417 match first-class career with an average of 27. It's pretty good. 2,500s in that time. So he's basically getting 100 every, what is that, about 17 matches, which, but they're still using him. One of the interesting things about him is he's the great grandson of John Fane, who's an MP from Wormsley. where, of course,
Okay.
the Getty estate is. He was a very vehemently anti-Catholic Tory, the Earl of Westmoreland. Now, I don't know about Freddie Luther fame, but he's from that family, a very sort of exalted one, the Earls of Westmoreland. And yet he was an MP for Wormsley and what was then Oxfordshire, I think now Buckinghamshire. Another 682 in their career, Tajul Islam. I'm not going to talk about him because he's on 682, and I confidently expect him to go past that. But he's a man of note. The 682 that really caught my eye was Van Burn Holder. Van Burn Holder scored 682 first-class runs in his career, and in a Test match that I'm briefly going to tell you about, he was involved in a Test match which has a statistical uniqueness, which I think is what story time is all about.
Sure
I want
is.
to take you back to the Packer era. It's 1977-78 season. I think the game takes place in April of 1978 in Trinidad. And for some reason, I've been on story time this last 3 weeks. I keep on finding myself in Trinidad because Trinidad is a sort of atypical place to look at the West Indies from in this 1970s era. It's a pitch and a ground that is notoriously slow, notoriously spinny. Well, not even really spinny, but the fast bowlers just don't like it. So the West Indies frequently make the mistake in that period of just picking spin bowlers who aren't any good. I talked about them with Bharat the other day. I think I talked about them last week with Andy Zaltzman. And this is a Packer era series. So this is a West Indies side, which has ironically got people who have been given their opportunity to play, who will, in later life, end up going to South Africa and be blackballed. They'll be gone from the whole system. But at this point, the rebels are actually the guys who are going to play for the West Indies for the next 10 years, and they're out in Australia playing in the Packer series, which is kind of fun. That it's the likes of Alvin Greenwich and Norbert Phillip, the great Essex stalwart, gets Test matches in this period, as did Sylvester Clarke. He got selected at various points, not in this particular Test match, but in this little era. And Australia have come, and Australia are Packer ravaged. They're kind of Peter Toohey and Craig Sargent, people like that, Graham Yallop, are in their outfit. And in a Test match that was really thrilling for 3 innings, let me just run you through the innings scores, because this is important. The West Indies scored 292. In reply, Australia scored 290. In reply, with a lead of 2, West Indies scored 290.
What?
I thought, hang on a minute.
Stop it.
This feels insane. So I get straight on to Andrew Sampson. Who wouldn't at a moment like that? You see those numbers written down together and your heart is pumping. You think, I might be onto a record here. Well, blow me down with a feather if it isn't a record. It is the only time that the 3 first innings of a Test match have been completed with as little as 2 runs separating them. It is a unique event. The next nearest is a thrilling Test match between Australia and England, or England and Australia in 1974, in which the first 3 innings are all within 4 of each other, 244, 240, 242, and then a 4th innings which ends on 238 for 8. A Test match that I cannot believe I don't know more about, but that this is not for today's final word. Someone give us an apposite number in there and we'll tell the story of that Test match, because that Test match is going to be up there with the Blue Suede Shoes Test match. What a thriller. This Test match wasn't so much of a thriller because Australia were bundled out for 94 in the 4th innings to lose by a handsome number, 198 runs. But Van Burn Holder starred in that game. Our man, don't forget, who had 682 runs in his Test career. If you don't know much about Van Burn Holder, he became an umpire. He was a stalwart of Worcestershire. He lives in Worcestershire. He moved to England in the late 70s, early 80s, and basically stayed in England and became a domestic umpire. And did he become I'm not sure if he did do internationals. He may have been an international umpire as well. He was the last black man up until 2021, at any rate, to have been appointed onto the panel. So he came after John Holder, which is a terrible indictment, really, of that side of things. He was kind of viewed as not like the fastest of the West Indies quicks. So in 1976, he formed part of that four-man pace attack with the likes of Wayne Daniel, Andy Roberts, and Michael Holding. And you sort of thought as a child, oh, Van Bernholder's on, that'll be less scary. He was brisk, he was slippery, and in 1978, he was leading the West Indies attack in that match. And deliciously, Adam, he took 6 for 28, which is not quite 6 for 82, but it's 6 for 28, which is kind of lovely. The man who scored 682 runs. So it works for me. It works for me. Those numbers are in there. But I'm going to finish off with 2 6 for 82s because, of course, having seen the 6 for 28, it got me, if only he got 6 for 82. Who's got 6 for 82? Well, because it's the final word, I'm going to start with Bhuvaneshwar Kumar, who did take 6 for 82 at Lord's in 2014. He took the wickets of, among others, Cook, Robson, Balance, Bell, Stokes, who got out for a duck batting at number 9. It was at Lord's in 2014, and Stuart Broad. England lost the match by 95 runs. You'd think Bhuvaneshwar Kumar would be man of the match, wouldn't you? Well, no. Can you believe it? He was trumped by, of all people, Ishant Sharma, who took 7 for 74 in the second innings. I mean, God, you've got it in the bag. And then Ishant Sharma comes along. From memory, that was a lot of England batters giving their wickets away, pulling and getting caught in the deep. Tough times, tough day that for England. That was 6 for 82, but my final 6 for 82, 682, 6.82, if you will, is Dennis Lillee. Because we like talking about Dennis Lillee, we like talking about the MCG. It was a test match that began on the 1st of January. Yes, I know it's talked about a lot on the final word. This tradition of the Boxing Day test match is a bullshit tradition. It's not real. These aren't traditions. They're just things that happen. And in 1977, the tradition, in inverted commas, that year was, it was 1977, was that the match took place at the MCG on New Year's Day, which I think is, given the way Aussies are now, I think that would be a cruel and unusual punishment to expect them to actually turn up to the MCG on New Year's Day.
It's as recent as I reckon even 2000. I think they played a test match. Sorry, 2001 possibly. They started the New Year's test on New Year's Day. It used to happen. I've interviewed players that were involved in the 90s where that was fairly routine. And yeah, they made similar observations that they reported back to the powers that be that it was not sustainable to keep playing on the 1st of January. Because that's Michael Bevan's miracle 100. Well, not 100, sorry, I'm exaggerating there. His unbeaten 72, I think, was New Year's Day 1996, a one-day international at Sydney. But yeah, you don't see much going on New Year's Day these days, although I think they've got an annual BBL fixture, but that's at night, a bit different.
They had a rest day, but of course, what everybody wanted was the rest day to come on the 1st of January.
Yeah,
Instead, it came somewhere in the middle. 6 for 82, Dennis Lillee takes against a Pakistan side that was really strong. It featured the likes of Majid Khan, Mushtaq Mohammed, Javed Miandad, Imran Khan. He got all of those out, incidentally, in his 6 for 82. I saw Gary Cozier scoring 168 in the match, which is, again, I've got a 6 and an 8 in there. It would have been nicer if he got 268, but it couldn't be helped. Out of a total of 517 for 8. Doesn't quite add to the 682, but it's handy. He then takes 4 for 53 in the second innings to give him match figures of 10 for 135, which is not shabby. And notable also in that match, what a time, what a different age it was. Imran Khan, in the second innings, when Australia went out about the same time, he bowled 25.5 overs out of the 61.5 that were bowled. And it sort of has me in mind of, the great Ian Botham stint in the Jubilee test in Bombay, as was, when he bowled unchanged. I think it's 26 and a half overs or something, opens the bowling and doesn't come off. And we both know what Bombay's like. That is a tough paper
Indeed.
round.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's kind of what Hadley used to say about in that era. There was very much a sense of bowling within oneself, about keeping top gear untouched as often as you could. And yeah, Botham obviously was able to buy. I know Mike Selby talks about this, about Botham version 1.0 in Top Gear was as quick as anything going on in the world. But he rarely needed to go there because he was able to do other things as a bowler, and obviously had the broader responsibilities as a batter as well, and having to sink heaps of piss as well, which of course was a big part of what he did. And meant, of course, how could he function otherwise? But yeah, so I'm not. Yeah, it does stand out as a seamer bowling that many overs on the trot, but I think it's partly to do with what was the considered norm in that era compared to now, where if you bowl within yourself now. Ollie Robinson bowled a spell in India earlier this year, which might be like almost like, I hate to say it, but it could end his England career, because the perception is that he bowled a spell in the low 70s. I can't remember which test match it was now. The test he was brought back for, clearly. And that's now seen as a bit of a symbol of how dreadfully unfit he is. And if he couldn't hold up to the rigours of Test cricket, it came out later that Ollie Robinson was actually injured and bowling injured in that innings. Same thing happened to Peter Siddle in 2019 at the Oval in what became his final Test match. He was bowling with the keeper up to the stumps and doing his best manfully to get through a spell when he was already injured. He'd done a groin injury on the first day. So, but back then, if you're bowling within yourself and bowling, 10 kilometres or 10 mile an hour short of your peak pace, that was just seen as good, responsible management of your body.
Yeah, and when you think about it, all these guys that we're talking about had as their finishing school county cricket. Yeah, and that was exactly what would happen. You hear tales of Malcolm Marshall and Mark Nicholas just having to say to him, "Come on, we want to go home," clapping his hands, and Marshall go, "Oh, okay." And then he'll go in and bowl at 86 miles an hour instead of 76 miles an hour and go through the tail, bang, bang, bang. I guess looking after yourself for the rigours of the game. But it does seem like they had quite a lot of bowlers, Pakistan, and poor old Imran was wheeled out just to keep going in what was ultimately a massive losing cause, because Dennis Lilly had got the game in the bag for them. It's a game that also featured Alan Turner, and I just mention Alan Turner because he's the first Aussie batter that I became really aware of. And it's funny how your memory plays tricks on you, because I sort of thought of Alan Turner as batting like forever in 1974 and 75, when I was like at my very youngest. And I went and checked the numbers, and it doesn't stand up to scrutiny. I think time must have just gone really slowly when I was a 5-year-old. It felt like he was in forever. But I had a particular penchant for Alan Turner. I loved his hair, and I loved the lapels on his shirt. And he features in this match. So that brought a little tear to my eye. 1977, the 1st of January, Dennis Lilly, 6 for 82 to go with Bhuvneshwar Kumar, Joe Root, Andrew Flintoff, Van Bernholder, and Frederick Luther Fane. And amidst all of that, we also have ourselves a world record, 682. If we haven't done justice to 682 with that, I don't know what will.
I think you have, Richard Johnson. We now know an awful lot more about your number. Thank you, Daniel. We were going to make this a relatively quick story time. You've made sure that won't be the case, which is your which is no, it's your prerogative. That means we've blown through what would have been me throwing to the first break. Let's pretend we've done that. To those who are listening, DC would have kindly slotted that in already at some point, I'm sure. I am, however, going to tell you about NordVPN, because we need our VPNs. I needed it this morning. I fired up NordVPN because Maxie was doing a TV interview in Australia, and I thought, probably should watch this. And my old media manager hat on, you know what I mean? Having worked in on that side of the ball before I was a journalist, it's probably quite important that I see how he goes on the project, and he did a great job on there. But I was only able to watch it live because I was tapping into Channel 10 via my NordVPN. So yes, for sports and entertainment, also for professional reasons too. You can access from the safety of your couch. It's got here, I don't know why safety is part of the copy, but we'll just go with that. You can get content no matter where you go, easily switch your virtual location, access apps and websites in different countries, access to social media in parts of the world where it's censored. I always like that. I don't know how many of our listeners are going into,
I can tell you because this is one of the very many brilliant things about NordVPN. I got NordVPN when I was out in Dubai. And initially, I couldn't quite understand what I was supposed to do, but that's because I'm an idiot. Other people who aren't idiots will crack it immediately. So after about 15 minutes of faffing around and then realizing, I know, I'm supposed to pick a server in the United Kingdom. That'll help my problem. Yeah, I know. I mean, everybody else will have worked that out in a nanosecond, but, I got there. So if I can get there, everyone can get there. And the reason for me why it was so vital wasn't just so that I could check all the highlights and go onto the BBC Sport website and app, among other things. which I otherwise wouldn't have been able to do. But I couldn't use WhatsApp to phone my wife. And there were some very serious issues taking place over the choosing or otherwise of tile colours and what type of window we're going to have in the bathroom. Now, these things need solving. And in the modern connected world, being 4,000 miles away in Dubai is no excuse. You cannot just allow that to drift, or else you'll lose, if you don't mind me saying so, the window for your window man to come and put in your window, right? If you don't have this conversation nailed down properly over the phone. I was panicking, but NordVPN came to my rescue, and I could use WhatsApp, because you can't use WhatsApp on the phone in Dubai. But via NordVPN, I could. And Catherine and I both agreed that a French-style butt sash window was the solution. That has been set in motion, and before long, I will have a fully functioning double-glazed window in my bathroom, thanks to NordVPN.
I think they call that a customer testimonial in the business. I love it, Daniel. Forget about the copy. That's all we need, I reckon. That's why you need to get... There's the discount we've already got going, plus an additional 4 months. So nordvpn.com/TFW. It's in the show notes. You know what you're doing. It used to be 6 devices, now 10. So 4 more devices. Used to be 60 countries, now 111. Jump on 1 foot, David Shepherd style. So yeah, nordvpn.com/TFW, 30-day money back guarantee, but you won't need it because NordVPN do great things. Right. Let's go to my second number, and then we'll take another ad, in the fullness of time. I think that's the way to do things today. This is from Randolph Brazier. Now, this is an interesting one, Daniel. 236 sterling from Randy Brazier, who ran with us in where were we? Edinburgh. I should know that. For the Lord's Taverners, your charity and mine. The Lord's Taverners earlier this year. Randy did the 10K, and his partner Izzy did as well, which was terrific, having them part of our community up there, which was wonderful. It makes me feel guilty about the fact that we've had some administrative challenges with his numbers, but it does provide me with the opportunity to do something rare. What I'm going to do here, something we've never done before, we're going to have in one answer a new number, because he's in the queue this week, a new number, a revisit that got lost in the cracks, and a confirmation because he didn't realize that his previous number got solved unbeknownst to him. So we're going to do all 3 things in one go. I'm quite excited about that. No one else will be, but here we are. So the new number is 236. The revisit is 246, and the confirmation is 206. So kind of grouped together like that test match you referred to before back in 1970, whatever it was. Let's deal with the confirmation first, because it's relevant to one of the times you and I recorded in your sitting room in Tooting a number of months ago. Now, 206 was indeed Paul Collingwood at Adelaide. You did that justice, Daniel. You went into great depth about what Paul Collingwood achieved across those 2 days. Days that I was going to say days I remember well. That would not be true. I got Clemoed across those couple of days at Adelaide. You know
vicious.
What that means?
Yeah,
our dear friend Matt Clemo, who has a constitution, you might say, that is unrivaled, truly unrivaled. But I was there. I know I was at Adelaide Oval across the Paul Collingwood 206. It did happen, but yeah, more for others.
Intriguingly enough, there's an entire class of people who refuse to accept that match has happened. The Barmy Army, for example, and you, unfortunately, just got Clemoed, which and I know full well what that's like.
Yeah, it was irresistible force. And we're going to come back to 206 later, by the way. I like that. I like when we can connect the dots. Before getting to the new number, though, let's go 246 next on the way through to it. Now, I have no idea what we did. Well, actually, I do now. I've got a feeling I know what we did. His clue originally was in relation to ducks. And what we did, I think it was Jeff. Almost certain it was Jeff. I reckon we named an episode after it. We told the story of when Plucka Duck played in the Dean Jones testimonial game of 1994-95. We've done this in such great detail before that I won't bore our listeners with it. But in summary for you, Daniel, Plucka Duck was a TV character on a show called Hey Hey It's Saturday. He was very naughty. He was a big duck in a big suit, and he was a massive deal in the 1990s. And he got the chance to play in the Dean Jones testimonial.
He's like Mr.
And
Blobby in England at the same time.
Very Mr. Blobby energy. Very, very Mr.
Right.
Blobby energy. Plucka Duck was naughty and did silly things and all the rest of it.
Right.
He bowled an over at the G. It's quite funny. I've got the scorecard somewhere and it's got, P Duck 1 over, none for 4. It was published in a newspaper the next day. But yeah, he bowled an over to my childhood hero, Jason Dunstall, who made 46. He was eventually out to 3-time world champion Jeff Fennick. Great man. Well, great boxer. I don't know whether he was a great man or not, to be honest. Yeah. Was Jeff Fennick a great man? Might be. The Marrickville Mauler. Is he a great man? Don't know. He might have been cancelled by now. On the other hand, he might be doing great things. Who's to know in this modern world? The Marrickville Mauler eventually got Jason Dunstall out for 46, but he did face an over from Plucka Duck first, giving a sense of what it was to be at a testimonial game at the MCG. Anyway, the second clue sharpened things up a bit. It wasn't this. Think of a male duck and hone in on the 2003 World Cup. Now, whenever we talk about the 03 World Cup, rightly or wrongly, my mind goes straight to John Davison, who made the record-breaking 67-ball 100 for Canada against the West Indies. And what do you know? This is Davo adjacent. I was just right. I said to Randy, it's about Davo. He goes, yeah, it is. It's about, kind of it is. So that didn't take long. And I mentioned before, today's the day, the 30th of October, time of recording, when Glenn Maxwell's book is on shelves. Well, John Davison gets a very generous mention as being the man who helped turn Glenn into an off-spinner. He was a medium pacer, bowling bounces at everyone in grade cricket, and his stint at the Cricket Academy helped fine-tune what he wanted to be as a finger spinner. And Davison, who's been the mentor to Nathan Lyon as well, was a bit of a finger spinner whisperer over the last 10 or 15 years and had the confidence of a lot of spinners who work with him from around the world. So he's part of that story here, having made the extraordinary 67-ball 100. It was the 4th fastest one-day 100 ever. And I have this lovely memory of watching it on my grandmother's. I was living with my nan at the time, who was an 80-year-old Welsh woman in 2003, and she would have been 80 just before then. And even she, who knew fuck all about cricket, was happy because I was happy. She was sitting on the sofa, smoking a Marlboro Lights, which I was bumming off her. And as you do when you're 18, living with your nan. My granddad had died not long before, so I spent about a year living with her or something like that on a couple of different occasions. And in Dandy West, but yeah, living there and enjoying the World Cup with her. That's when Davo did his thing. He was eventually out, and it brought up the 100 with a 6 that, as it turns out, Dean Jones, who I referred to before, he was the colour commentator going absolutely nuts because they played together for Victoria some years earlier.
I remember it really well because it was an innings of such sublime brutality. It was one of those moments where somebody just plays the innings of their life. I mean, he's a good player, Davo, but it's not quite like Atkinson's 100 at Lords, but it sort of was insofar as all the stars kind of aligned. Everything came right out the middle of his bat. Some of the sixes were just sublime. It was because it was for Canada as well. Yeah, this was just it was exactly what the tournament needed, wasn't it? It's what Canada needed. What all those tournaments need is basically somebody from one of the less fancy teams to play an innings for the ages. A little bit like how Zimbabwe, or there would have been Zimbabwe then, had India in trouble in 1983, before Kapil comes out. It was a sort of thing that it needed. It was, it was epochal.
Well, yeah, Zimbabwe by that point of the 83 World Cup had already knocked off Australia. Had they beat India as well, it would have been a seismic moment, not to be. But yeah, you're right, that the World Cup, it kind of made by associate nation moments, aren't they? And that's what this constituted at the time. Davo, who, as recently as a couple of years before this was bowling off spin for the Vicks, mentioned watching first-class cricket on telly. I have a nice memory in 2001 when Cameron White played his first-class game for the Vicks at the SCG against New South Wales, of course, and getting Michael Bevan out with a wrong un, on debut and watching him bowl in tandem with John Davison, who was the more the journeyman by that stage, and he finished his career in South Australia, I'm pretty sure, and he was playing for Canada through the stretch of time. And Jeff's told a great story where in a game, an Intercontinental Cup game for Canada, he picked up 14 wickets and made 100 in a game against the USA, which I think was Canada's first-class game in 100 years or something ridiculous. So anyway, point is that this was a big deal. Everyone was watching. And, when he's out for 111 from his 76th ball, it's only like the 23rd over. Like, he really did miss a chance to make 200 plus. He's denied by one of the great catches, though. And this comes back to our clue. And it'll make sense to you in a moment as a man of letters and a man of words. It's one of the great catches. Running backwards, one-handed, after misjudging it entirely, there was, remember the duck bit?
Yeah.
Vasbert Drakes. The Drake. Against Canada, if you want to play that game as well, with Drake being Canadian artist and so on. There's a great bit of commentary from Tony Cozier. He didn't get it wrong so often, Cozier, one of the greats, but he got it slightly wrong here. In fact, I'm gonna drop it in. So there you can hear Tony Cozier emphatically reporting that he dropped the catch and got it completely wrong, only for Drakes to have dragged in one of the all-timers. It goes on to turn the game. I mean, they're 155 for 1 in the 21st over. And sadly, Canada all out for 202. So they lost, 9 for 47 or something like that. Davo, a 54%er, not quite Bannerman, but Bannerman areas, generally speaking. And our man, Vasbert Drakes, takes 5 for 44 in that after the great catch. So it was a big day out. They win it in 21 overs. Lara makes 73 from 40. So what could have been a complete disaster for the Windies ended up being a net run rate booster, and there would be no Centurion miracle. Drakes, interestingly, was more known for his county cricket. The story went that he made his one-day debut against the Australians in 1995, then went totally into the wilderness. He played domestic cricket for Sussex, Notts, Warwickshire, Leicestershire, and Border in South Africa, where he played every winter. Of course, he played at home as well, but the point is he was having a different kind of life, nowhere really near the West Indies team, until he was well into his 30s. I think he's 33 or something like that when this World Cup's being played. He enjoyed some big moments for the Windies too. He was 27 not out at the end of the most successful fourth innings test run chase ever in Antigua in 2003 when they hauled down 418 on the final day. And yes, that's a Sarwan story. It's a Lara story. But, there's Drakes at the end holding on, or more than holding on. They got there by about 5 wickets, I think, and making 27 not out. That was the high point with the bat in his 12 unexpected test matches in the early 2000s. And he also picked up a fifer against Australia at Georgetown in that series. In the coloured clothing, 51 one-day wickets, a best of 5 for 33. That was also in the same World Cup. He picked up 5 for 33 against Kenya. There can't be too many cricketers who've taken 2 fifers in the same World Cup. There might be a handful. I think Glenn McGrath might have done so in 2003 as well. But still, that's not for nothing. And the 246, that would be the Ducks one-day cap number for the West Indies. So that all ties together quite neatly for Randy there. We've got the 206 done. You go, please. Yes.
Just on the 246. You see, without the clue, I would have gone, because 246 is a number that's ingrained in my brain, because it is the score, I believe, that Geoffrey Boycott made. Was it against India in the mid-60s? And it took him 5 sessions to do it. And then he was dropped for slow play.
Yeah.
Because it's an interesting one, because it's about how the selectors at home used to be desperately keen for exciting cricket. And so that you would drop people on a whim, captains would come and go in England in the 1960s. And it's why players loved touring, because when they went on tour, the selectors were stuffed with, there's nothing they could do. The team was there. So they would decide when they went away that they were going to play for ball draws, because that's what they did. But at home, and when you think of Geoffrey Boycott, you think of slow scoring. Of course you do, but 246 in 5 sessions isn't bad. That's like 100. That's like 50 runs a session. That isn't bad.
Yeah, you are doing your job. I mean, the more egregious one was when they dropped Barrington for similar slow play reasons, because they were sensitive about the message it was sending at the time. It was during the 64 Ashes, I want to say. That's certainly when Barrington made his long triple ton. Anyway. Well, no, it wasn't triple, was it? It was 268.
200 and, something like that.
264, 60, whatever.
Cowper get
Bobby
300,
Simpson.
or Bobby Simpson.
Simpson
got
300. Yeah.
300.
Anyway. So, 246, it was Drake's one-day cap number for the Windies. Now, new number, you ask. Well, I won't keep you waiting any longer, Daniel. And why it's interesting and timely is that it's come up quite a bit. Indeed, it's come up as recently as, I think, maybe even last week when you were on the show. If not that, then maybe the week before when you were on with Barat. 236, the clue was this: German engineering. Now, the second clue, I'll let you sit with that. The second clue was that Randy spent some time thinking, to use his words, he'd fucked up and it should have been 235, not 236. Now, first of all, Glenn Finkeld, he thought, I've made a blue here. He is right. It could be either. I think if I've got this correct, it could be either 235 or 236. But I know where he's coming from. So Glenn Finkeld had a thought here initially saying Mercedes Baxter Chinery, something like that, played for Cambridgeshire and Huntingdonshire women, and played 10 games. But that's her lot. So
Is that
it's not
Chinnery?
close. There's one N in there. Baxter
shame. Because
yeah.
there were two Chinnerys that played for Surrey just before the First World War, who both died in the First World War. They're on the famous memorial board, which Surrey is the only one which has not just all of its first class players, but all of its second 11 and youth players on its board, as well as people who worked at the club. But that was a Chinnery, and I suppose it could be related. So,
well, it's not. Sadly, it's a bit more. It's a bit more basic bitch than that. To use the modern jargon, it's German engineering and cricket. Audis. It's Mark Wall's nickname for a time, and sure, can't entirely rule out this being about Mark Wall. I don't think it is though, because in the last couple of story times, and indeed I think one of our weekly shows as well, we've been talking about Ravi Shastri's Audi that he won on the field of the SCG in 1986. The gold car that he drove around with the whole Indian team hanging out the side of it, kind of thing. As you and I learnt on SEN last year when working with the great Ravi Shastri, he still got it in Mumbai. This came up in the context of the Batmobile. So, the Popemobile, sorry. The Popemobile that Modi and Albo rode around in, and we were watching. Like, we couldn't believe what we were watching. I still can't quite believe that
utterly
happened
surreal.
There. Yeah, 60,000 party members whisked into the stadium by 6:30 in the morning and out before the first ball was fucking bowled. It was remarkable. It was fucking remarkable.
Poor old Mohammed Shami had to bowl it with absolutely no warm-up.
Yeah.
And predictably, it was wide down the leg side.
it was the most. Yeah, I think that you and I, we've been lucky to do what we do. It's got to be on the podium for the weirdest things I've seen in a cricket match. Anyway, so that was the Popemobile, which we subsequently found. I think Gideon Haigh found it originally, and we all went off and took photos in it, and that was all rather fun. But we asked Shastri about it, and thus the gold card. He's like, yeah, got it refurbed last year. So the Audi still is there. He's got it in a garage in Mumbai somewhere, and it's such an icon of his career and an emblem of what he was able to achieve in Australia in 1986. So sticking with Shastri here. So there's the gold car, the Audi. What about the number? 235, 236. Well, for that, let's go to 91-92, the World Cup to be precise, and a huge day at the Gabba in Brisbane. Now, I referred before to the excitement of being on my grandmother's mat that she used to have in front of the telly in 2003. I don't know whether I would have been laid in front of the TV when I was 18. I was probably on the sofa. Certainly when I was a kid, I loved nothing more than they had it looks like a proper sort of living room fire. It was just a switch at the wall thing. It was a facade. But I loved laying in front of that and watching the footy and the cricket. And so I was doing this day at the Gabba, laying on the mat in front of the TV, watching Australia play India. Now, Australia made 237 for 9. Dino made 90. All of Australia was with Dean Jones at this point. They'd started the tournament poorly, losing to New Zealand and South Africa. They had to beat India. Now, I get the concern that Randy's had here about 235, 236, for there was a rain delay, a brief one, and they adjusted the target from 238 to 236. This was a day that Matt May, one of our Nerd Pledge CSI crew, has given us an answer on recently. This was a weird World Cup in that they played games concurrently. Being a Sunday, there was the Gabba game going on. Over in Adelaide, it pissed it down, a game you would absolutely know, where England had rolled Pakistan for 70-odd, 72, 73.
And vital moment in the entire World Cup. I listened to that on an old music centre because we didn't have it on the TV.
Right.
And it was extraordinary because, of course, were it not for that rain, Pakistan would have been out of the tournament and they would not have been able to be caged tigers. There would have been none of the kind of reductivist nonsense about how they always come back and you get the sort of like two different types of Pakistan. They were basically saved by rain. They were thrashed in that game. It was an extraordinary shellacking, but I think England did go out to bat, didn't they? I think they went out
lunch.
And then they took lunch. Yeah, of course they did.
They took
and
lunch.
That lunch saved Pakistan.
It did. It probably saved Imran. Remember, Imran came back from that tournament at age 40. He probably would have been locked up then. Wouldn't have taken the extra 30-odd years without wanting to trivialise what's happening in Pakistan at the moment. Anyway, I suppose I've done that. Over in Brisbane, though, up on, I guess, northeast of what was going on at Adelaide with the rain, Shastri opens the batting, and they need to go up better than 5 and over. And he doesn't. He bats for 75 minutes and 67 balls for 25. So he absorbs the whole window of play when the field's up, which was for 15 overs in those days with the field up. And he left too much work to do for India. Azharuddin nearly gets there, an outstanding 93 and a thrilling end to the match that we told when doing that Matt May answer where there was 2 balls to go and 2 run-outs, and Venkatapati Raju, any excuse to say his name, was run out from the final ball via Steve Waugh out in the deep. Australia win by a run. Everyone's happy. What's this got to do with anything? Well, because India have lose by a run, they end up making 234 instead of getting to their target of 235 or 6 or whatever the fuck I said before.
Yeah,
I've got confused by this whole thing myself now. Yeah, they've lost by 1 run either way. And Shastri was blamed, and he was gone, and he was dropped, and that was him done for the tournament. And, the 206, if you want to come back to that, Zoltz mentioned that last week with you. It was only a month or two on from when he made his test 206 at the SCG. So Shastri went from the proverbial chocolates to boiled lollies. In that, a prominent member of that Indian team at Sydney, and then dropped after his very slow go at Brisbane. And it feels fitting as well because, what was Shastri's score? I say it again, 25, and that was the number that Zoltzman was so utterly fixated on last week, giving us one of the great final word storytime deep dives. It was like I was watching him comprise one of his Wisden Cricket Monthly columns in real time when he digs into the details of one number. So that was that. Oh, and by the way, Vasbert Drake's, if you're pondering, what was his highest score? Well, that was 25 as well in that 2003 World Cup. It was meant to be. So all tied back together. A confirmation, a revisit, a new number, a triple header. Randolph Brazier, great name, great man. Looking forward to catching up with him next week. And yes, we've got the decks cleared for him.
I take my hat off to you.
Right, Daniel, I'm going to take a break for real this time. There'll have been breaks already, probably slotted into this already, but we'll take one that'll cue you up and give you a chance to get ready for your last answer on Storytime 207. It is the final word story time. It is Adam Collins. It is Daniel Norcross. We have one number to go. Before getting into it, just want to thank everybody for being part of our patron community, part of our final word world more generally. A lot of people do crowdfunding these days, and it's important and it's great, and it just brings a whole different element to being able to make independent media. Before this, it wouldn't have been viable for Jeff and I to have a show that gets made 250 times a year. We're in the process of compiling a few tapes at the moment, and you're reminded of the breadth of what we've done even in the last 12 months, ranging from the Men's World Cup in India, where Jeff was all across the country, of course, collaborating with you, and Cam Ponsonby back here with me, the home summer, all the women's internationals we've done between times, the women's Ashes, the Women's World Cup most recently with you and Cameron, the home summer over here, Test series in New Zealand. The list goes on and on and on. And fundamentally, that doesn't happen without Patreon. I know we've got commercial partners, and we've explained over the journey that's just necessary. If we didn't have commercial partners, we couldn't make it work either, and we're really grateful for them. But the bedrock of the final word is Patreon. Yeah, we always say it, but we can't thank you enough for being there for us. And if you have been with us for a long time and you want to sign up, there's no better moment than the start of a new Aussie summer, because this is when it gets real for us, for Jeff and me. Heaps of flying around the country, fucking expensive. None of this is easy. None of it's paid for. It's always off our own bat. So if you want to play a role in helping make sure that we can keep doing what we're doing, all the interviews that we've done of late, the one with Maxi, which was incredibly well received, Ben Duckett as well, heaps of high-profile interviews we've got planned through the summer. It'd be great to have you with us. Patreon.com/thefinalword. Of course, that's in the show notes. Become part of our Discord community, which is where some of the most wonderful people I met in my life live on there with us and talk about cricket. And it's not just an online thing either. So many people from there have become friends with us in real life and will be lifelong friends. So it's a good thing. It's a great thing. Be there with us if you see fit to do so. Daniel?
Well, just to amplify that, I didn't get the opportunity to catch his name, but hello to the person I met in Sharjah, who is an avid listener and watcher of the final word, as I was charging towards Cam Ponsonby to make an episode at the end of a match. He said hello, and he loves the final word and everybody involved in it. So hello, I'm sorry I didn't catch your name as I was legging it through a very hot Sharjah. But it was lovely to meet you.
It's a nice part of that. I can't say it's not a lovely part when people come up to you who you don't know and they know you. And the reason they know us is because of the show, right? They know what we do and how hard we work on it. So thank you to everybody who's been part of that. And indeed, if you get on Patreon now, that means you can get that discount to the live show. It's all part of it. We're trying our best here. So thank you again to everybody and everyone who's pledged today, including Tim Unwin, who I've already name-checked once. Now, he's got a 359 number, right? And what we thought we would do here, and Daniel, you'll thread it together beautifully in your classical fashion. Tobi Wilson, again, another great supporter. We had a lot of those today who've been with us from the start. 735. Neither of them come with clues, but there is a very nice through line between both Tim and Tobi. So I put this idea to you. I'm looking forward to seeing how you've done this, and I suspect we're going to be here for a while. Have fun. Speak to you soon.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you're sent two numbers that don't look like they're connected, you search around for connections. You're bound to do that. And 359. You see, the thing about 359 is that I guess this is possibly an English or British thing, but that is again, it's one of these numbers. A bit like the 246 of Boycott or the 364 of Hutton, which is ingrained. And it's ingrained in large part because whenever England has a large partnership, and I'm thinking back to like 1985 when David Gower featured in two 300-plus partnerships, one with Graham Gooch at the Oval and another with Tim Robinson in the match before, in the last two matches of the 1985 Ashes series, up would come a list of the highest partnerships and for each wicket. And there's an England opening partnership which surpassed the great 323 between Rhodes and Hobbs, which I'm sure has been mentioned on Final Word many times. It's one of those examples of how Wilf Rhodes was such a versatile all-rounder who batted at the top of the order and the bottom and all sorts. Well, this 359 is Cyril Washbrook and Len Hutton, and that is a number that is ingrained on English cricket tragic's heart because it is the highest first wicket partnership, and it remains the highest first wicket partnership to this day. It would have been featured on the list of high partnerships when Brooke and Joe Root had their recent record-breaking, beating the 411 of May and Cowdrey. It would always be in that list. That was what 359 meant to me. A very brief aside. I don't know if I've ever mentioned that when Cyril Washbrook died, the BBC wanted to get, responses from players who played with him. And of course, Trevor Bailey was a regular on Test Match Special at the time. Trevor Bailey was one of the most literal men in the world. He was not an emotional man or a sentimental man, right? And of course, Five Live had rung him up and said, can we get your thoughts on Cyril Washbrook? Expecting him, the usual lovely family man. He's, nice, homely, positive feelings type stuff, because the modern world loves feelings rather than facts. And Trevor Bailey said, Cyril was a splendid player of both front and back foot, was particularly excellent on uncovered wickets, was a fine opening batter who could blunt any new ball attack. Anything else you'd like to add to that, Trevor? Occasional bowler, but nothing much to write home about.
Is that what they taught you? Is that how they taught you to behave at Dulwich College, Daniel? That's one of your alumnus, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Stiff upper lip and all that. Interestingly enough, I'm not going to go into the other aside, which is another Dulwich alumnus. John Dews came up on Twitter the other day as a very rare man who couldn't work out whether he got a first-class 100 before he played a Test match in 1948 or not. But that's for another story time. If you want to give us a John Dews link, I'm very happy to take that one on.
Well, John Dews could join Jacob Bethel. Who's to know? He's not made a first-class 100. Well, it sounds like he's going to be shipped into the Test team.
That's exactly why it came up. And John Dews taught me geography at school. Yeah, I didn't do very well at geography, but I don't think it was his fault. So that was what 359 meant to me. And then 735. What does 735 mean? Well, again, I go in search of 7 for 35s, don't I? Do you know there's only one in international cricket, amazingly? It's Tony Locke against New Zealand at Old Trafford in 1958. Could Tony Locke be the 359th England player? No, he can't. This is very upsetting to me. I thought I was onto something there. And then, of course, I think a couple of our lovely squirrels had got this link, but also Andrew Sampson did for me. He said 7:35. 7:35. That's an important score. And he had the 359. Now, the 359, Andy Zaltzman had told me, was the target that England needed at Headingley in 2019 to win. Am I getting any closer? No! I'm getting further away, if anything. But Andrew Sampson, dear Andrew Sampson, confirmed. Because 735 does feel like a thing, doesn't it? And I want to take you back to Perth in October of 2003, when a young Matthew Hayden, well, not that young, he's actually quite old. he's
quite deep into his career. He's a few years into his really productive. Well, he returned to the Australian team in 2000. This is right in the middle of where Hayden's a machine.
That's exactly it. And he scores the 380. He's allowed to go past Donald Bradman, which is very good. I think
this came up again recently, by the way. This fucking nonsense about Mark Taylor. I feel like Tubby needs to put a statement out each time this comes up. Like EJ Ahmed got in the way and denied him the 335th run. I saw a bunch of gibber, as usual types of place on social media where I really, really should not go. Those Facebook pages with fuck me. You think these people are new to cricket? They all look the same in terms of they all demographically present the same is what I meant to say. But like some of the shit they say. But this was when Brooke was zeroing in on, maybe breaking, any of the records. And it was like, he couldn't possibly go past 334 because, of course, the deference shown. I mean, Taylor declared overnight that is true and did make contact with Bradman. But as he said, he wasn't trying to knock it on the head on 334 last ball of the day. He was trying to hit it for 4. It was a coincidence that he finished at 334 not out at stumps that night, which batting into a third day would have been, as he saw it, thoroughly indulgent. So anyway, just felt like saying that for the record, given it's been doing the rounds again recently, myth busting.
Well, Hayden was permitted to go past 334 in large part because they're playing against Zimbabwe, and also because he was going so bloody quickly. It's one hell of a knock, albeit, look, it's against Zimbabwe, but Zimbabwe had Heath Streak, it had Andy Blignott. It wasn't the worst Zimbabwe attack. And it was quite an unusual test match in its own way because he makes his way to 380. But although Australia win, they're kind of held up a little bit by rain, and they're held up by injury as well. Jason Gillespie gets injured, does he not? As does Stuart McGill. So as a result, Darren Lehman bowls an exceptionally large number of overs. He bowls 31 overs in the second innings. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of that going on. Okay, well, let's just say if that is Matthew Hayden, how does 359 kind of come in? Well, blow me down with a feather if he's the 359th player to play for Australia.
There we go.
And now I'm thinking, now we're sorted. We're absolutely sorted. So it's definitely Matthew Hayden.
So Tim's number's 359, and as you mentioned before, so that ties in beautifully to Tobi's 735 together at last.
It really does. Now, a couple of things. I'm going to go on a very brief tangent around the 735 because, unfortunately, 359 doesn't allow me to have my little perambulation through the Bible. Now, we all know that Matthew Hayden is a devout man, a devout Christian, who's taken his faith very seriously. So I thought, are there any messages from the Gospels that might be able to help us? And using the number 735, I've got a few for us. So I've looked at the book of John, chapter 7, verse 35. Where did this man intend to go that we will not find him? Will he go where our people have been scattered amongst the Greeks and teach Greeks? I thought, well, in a way, that is what Matthew Hayden's done. He's gone to India to spread the word of cooking and being Haydos and wearing that gigantic hat. We saw him around during the Border Gavaskar Trophy looking enormously powerful. He's been scattered, as John 7:35 said. What about the book of Mark? The book of Mark, chapter 7:35 says, and this is a very interesting one because I believe this is during the feeding of the 4,000. And I can't think of a more Matthew Hayden thing to do than to feed the 4,000 with fish. He says, "Forever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it." So basically, just got to find out where somebody sacrificed themselves in a run out so that Matthew Hayden could continue, and they have fulfilled the teachings of Mark, chapter 7, verse 55.
I don't think we've done a lot of things on this show across 207 episodes. A lot of different ways of formulating answers and crunching numbers, but this is the first time we've turned to the good book. I mean, we've turned to the other good book repeatedly, the Almanac, but the other good book. May this be a theme in the future. I mean, we've turned to the laws of the game repeatedly, but never Bible verses. So thank you for the left field thinking. And it couldn't be more appropriate with respect to Haydos, who, as we know, has written a number of cookbooks. Do you want me to tell you a little quick Haydos anecdote? Have we got time for a quick one? I think we probably do. In about 2000 and when was it? A long time ago. I was commissioned to go up to Queensland to explore whether Matthew Hayden might be interested in a parliamentary career. I went up there and just to put the feelers out at the time. I'm not going to go into depth about how this conversation started, but it happened, right? And I met with his manager at the time, who was one of these kind of managers to the stars. I'm not sure whether he still looks after Haydos, but he was broader than just a cricket agent in the traditional sense. He didn't have I don't believe, a host of cricketers. I think from memory, he was the guy that brought Nelson Mandela out to Australia and stuff like that. He was a guy who had and it was made pretty clear to me that there was no way in the world that he would be interested in doing something when he had such a terrific life. And a big part of that at the time, post playing for Haydos, was the books. It was the cookbooks. He was a publishing behemoth for a while there. I mean, it's not really my go.
Brilliantly titled, by the way. Brilliantly titled. The Matthew Hayden Cookbook and the Matthew Hayden Cookbook 2.
I didn't realise it was that. It was that literal. It's the Trevor Bailey version of that naming a book. But
it is. But also, I want to thank him for that, because it would be so easy for him to have something like opening up, and it would be a book of starters. Do you know what I mean? Maybe he should. Yeah. But those are the worst ones. The worst autobiographies are the ones that use puns. So good for you, Matthew Hayden.
But I also think the other part of that, the idea of him feeding 4,000, that is bang on for him. I think he would see himself in that mold of being the kind of guy who could generously feed a village in a biblical way.
I haven't quite finished on the Bibles, because there's two other Gospels which I'll get through very briefly. Luke chapter 7 verse 35 doesn't seem to say much. It says, "Yet wisdom is justified by all her children." But the next verse, 7:36, says, "One of the Pharisees asked him to eat with him, and he reclined at the table," which I feel is close enough. So that brings us more Hayden, more food. And, of course, ironically, because you'll be saying, what about Matthew's Gospel? Surely we should be looking there. Unfortunately, Matthew chapter 7 finishes at verse 28. So we don't get a verse 35. So,
but perfect.
It would be in a way, but in a sense, it means that there's more of Matthew's story to unfold, which is the way I like to think about it. So that's a kind of positive spin on the lack of Matthew chapter 7, verse 35. I was initially disappointed, but I've, made myself feel a little bit better. Just a brief sort of look around Haydos's career and a reminder of who it's sort of dovetailed with. He played in Jimmy Anderson's first one-day international back in 2002. It was a drubbing for England, a very strong Australian side. Around that time when they were going to win back-to-back World Cups, which he was a member in both. And Jimmy Anderson can sneak into this a little bit, because he did take 7 for 35 this summer in Southport against Notts, proving simultaneously that he is the best England bowler out there, and that England have done this really weird thing. I mentioned this on a different podcast yesterday. They've managed to send the best bowler in New Zealand conditions to be a net bowler in New Zealand conditions. So all the batters should at least get some kind of assistance. But that Jimmy Anderson, Jimmy Anderson's taken 7 for 35. Jimmy Anderson, his first one-day international was against Haydos, and of course he also played in that 2006-7 series when Jimmy Anderson sort of drifted out the side. He was out of the side, a little bit of an injury, tried to remodel the action, came back. It's the early part of his career. He's not particularly prolific, but he's starting to turn things around, and in an otherwise dismal series for England, Anderson is starting to become the bowler that we are going to know and love.
I genuinely think that was the turning point for him as an international cricketer, because it was fucking tough, right? Absolutely brutal. This goes back to a story that I may have told at the time, where friend of the pod, Kieran Gilbert, who's a political reporter in Canberra, a very good one at that, on Sky News, and Brenton Speed, I think you know Daniel, he's a wonderful commentator on any number of sports. He does footy and football, soccer, cricket, does everything, Speedo. And they had a bet at the Sydney Test of 2007 who was going to take more Test wickets, Jimmy Anderson or Sajid Mahmood. Fair to say that there was a discrepancy in where that ended up in terms of lovely bloke Saj, by the way. I interviewed him for something last year, but he's a cricket coach at a school these days where they're trying to get cricket into a government school. Anyway, by the by, but yeah, Jimmy, I feel like that's when he turned the corner, because 4 years earlier in 2002, he kind of made his way into the England team via the academy. He went from nowhere, from Burnley to England in 3.2 seconds. And I was there at that 9th of December 2002 game. I remember it well. The Shane Warne doing his shoulder. We spoke about it a couple of months ago, I guess, and being there on a date at the time in Bay 13 and all the rest of it. That's the story that our audience knows well. But yes, that was when Anderson, who's been interviewed about this day a number of times, said he ran into kind of, Hayden, Gilchrist, Ponting, and it wasn't very nice. And it took him a while to find his feet, and then, of course, stuck around for 22 years.
Well, he opened the bowling in that match with James Kirtley, which is the thing, and Alex Stewart was playing in it as well. So that
might be a through line there between James Kirtley and Tony Locke from earlier in your answer.
Well, there very much could be with the old action. Yeah.
Sorry, I shouldn't say that. That's quite nasty of me.
Well, no, I mean, it's true. It was there. Just sort of the bare bones of Haydos's career, because I realise we've been going on quite a while as I've gone into my biblical rhapsodies.
That's okay.
But he played his first test in 94, was in and out of the side a little bit. It was a tough time to be an opening batter in Australia, because you got the likes of Slater, Taylor, Matty Elliott, one of the great, possibly unfulfilled talents. I mean, he fulfilled it in moments, but what a player he was. I remember him coming to England and was astounded by it's similar to Hayden in a way, the presence that he had at the wicket, the power of his strokes. That 380, by the way, came in what was a sort of a bit of a purple patch. Before 2001, the India tour, he'd averaged just 24.36 from his first 13 tests. And when you think he ended up with an average of 50.73, 8,600 runs, and not forgetting his ODIs, massively important part of his career, often overlooked by me. I was going to say us, but it's more me than others, because you forget 6,000 runs in ODIs. I mean, that's 14,700 runs in international cricket, and just those two formats is quite something with 40 hundreds. But he bounced back. That 380 he got from 437 balls, and it was a record that lasted, very annoyingly, 163 days, which I can't shoehorn into 735, and I divide it in there. It doesn't work. I can't. It's like 4.5. It doesn't work with 359 either, which is a great disappointment to me. But it was a record that lasted only 163 days, because Brian Lara beat it on the 12th of April the following year, which is a bit of a shame.
This is what happened with Sandham and Brad. That happened with Sandham and Bradman as well. The record didn't last long. 325 to 334 was April to June or July, I think it is, and it was this similar length of time here where he only held the world record for whatever it is, a number of months.
It's a quickie.
Lara didn't like having it taken away.
Well, and you can understand why. He did have a slump in 04. He went 16 tests without 100. He didn't reach, and I've sort of forgotten this, he didn't make 40 in the 05 Ashes. He didn't make it to 40. When I don't know whether England spooked him a little bit with the Matthew Hoggard coming over the wicket, close wicket to wicket, and Michael Vaughan putting in those tricksy mid-on stroke mid-offs that were quite, the ball never went there, but sort of in his eye line. But he was I think getting Matthew Hayden out was sort of one of the more unremarked on but most important aspects of the 2005 Ashes for England, because Langer and Hayden came as this scary pair, and with Hoggard getting those out, and then the quicker bowlers coming in to the middle order, that was a huge part of England's ability to win that series. That's basically Matthew Hayden, except for one detail, which I'm hoping you can help me with, because I chanced upon this, and I'm staggered that I don't know more about this. Apparently, in 1995, I wonder if you'll know yet, he took the Gladiator Team Sports Challenge and got in a boat with Andrew Simons and one other unnamed individual.
The fishing trip.
Which it capsized near North Stradbroke Island, and he had to swim a kilometre to safety, and it inspired him to be the face of like maritime safety ads or something, or swim safe ads. And I found out where Stradbroke Island is, and I would not want to be swimming a kilometre in those waters. I'd be thinking, I mean, I'm English, but I'd be thinking crocodiles, jellyfish, sharks. I mean, if anybody could beat them off, I guess Hayden and Simons would be the pair.
I don't know how, but Stradbroke Island came up recently with Jeff talking it up, and yes, that's right. He did swim as I guess he swam as far as JFK did when he was trying to save his life. Very different circumstances, but yeah, he and Andrew Simons were brought ever closer through that. That came up quite a bit about the relationship between the two of them, how it was forged quite early with that episode, and how they were very lucky to get out of it alive. So definitely part of it. Daniel, this is extraordinarily comprehensive. I feel like the two things have been drawn together as well as they ever have been. Sorry, am I cutting you off prematurely? Is there more to go?
No. I think we all know about. We all know about the mighty Haydos. We could go into more and more detail, but
we could.
We're already about 15 minutes over.
No, that's okay. That's okay. We've given it a red hot go. I hope what will be appreciated from Tobi and Tim is that you've had a crack. As with all of our pledges today, mentioned before, patreon.com/finalword to join that world. Thank you to everybody who's already been there. Thank you, Daniel, for always being a loyal companion here on Storytime. I don't doubt you'll be back soon. I can't entirely rule out you joining us again next week. Who's to know? Might be 4 in a row. I don't know. Jeff's not around at the moment. I'm working these things out on the fly. So it could well be. You know what it'll be next weekend? The US election will have been and gone. So we'll have that to talk about, if nothing else. I suspect that's going to be a strong theme of the episodes that we make next week. Yeah, I know. There is a bit of that at the moment. Right, I've been Adam Collins. He's been Daniel Norcross. This has been The Final Word Storytime 207. Be sure to have yourself a very lovely weekend. Goodbye.
Bye.